Good morning, everyone. Today is the 28th day of the month of Av, and it is the 23rd day of the month of August, if I got that one right. Good morning. It's Sunday morning. Another week is here, and we are in the midst of discussing the book called The Four Worlds. This booklet, which is translated into English, is taken from a letter written by the sixth Lubavitcher Rebbe, Rabbi Yosef Yitzchak, who, my namesake, who passed away in 1950 in Brooklyn, New York. He was the one who brought Chabad to the shores of the United States. And somebody had written him a letter and said, I don't understand the concept that is brought all through Hasidic teachings. It's rooted in the Kabbalah, and it says that there are four worlds. And the four worlds, their names are Atzilus, or Atzilut, Beria, Yetzira, and Asiya. Atzilut means the world of emanation, Beria means the world of creation, Yetzira means the world of formation, and Asiya means the world of action. And that's the world we are present in, that world. So there are spiritual worlds. And this is based on a verse which is mentioned in Pirkei Avot, mentioned elsewhere, that when God talks about the creation, he uses four different expressions of creation. So we know that there are four different worlds, if you will, four different stages, or four different ways of how the energy, which is godly, turns into this world, which doesn't look like it's God out there. You have to really search for God. It's also based on the fact that God's name is comprised of four letters: Yud, Hey, and Vav, and Hey. That's his main name, the ineffable name of God. Why four letters? Why is it that way? So everything is, when it comes to God, everything, and the fact that we are taught this in the Torah and elsewhere, everything is for a precise reason. Because there are four stages. God doesn't need a name. His name is there to transmit his energy to this world, to us. And so these are four stages. Within these four stages, we call them worlds. Within these four worlds or levels or stages or whatever, there is multitudes of stuff going on. It's like a filtering system, a filtration system. This is where the angels reside. In different worlds, different types of angels. In the morning davening, which is taken from the book of Yecheskel, the book of Ezekiel, there's a description of angels which are like wheels, angels which are like comparable to animals, Ophanim, Chayot HaKodesh, holy animals, Seraphim, burning angels. These are all references to angels in different stages. Some of them are spinning like wheels. They're not wheels, they're spinning. Or it seems to us, to the vision of this prophet, Yecheskel, to him it was as if it was spinning, because they are very far from God, and when they get a little bit of a revelation, they start jumping, they go crazy. The burnt ones don't spin, but they're burning up, and then the ones that are like animals are filled with energy and light, but they're not burning, and so they're able to tolerate God more. They're on a higher level. That's angels. Then there are souls coming from different levels. You got the soul of Moses coming from the world of Atzilus, the highest level. And then you have the soul of other people who may come from a very much lower, much more filtered down type of world. And you don't notice when you bump into somebody whose soul comes from the world of Atzilus, you are inclined to become closer to God, because that projection comes to you. When you went before the Rebbe, for example, you were there for 2 or 3 seconds, you were in awe, because you just felt it. You felt this level of holiness. And this is across the board. I'm talking about people as secular as perhaps Rabin, or from the Israeli government. People who didn't have, or writers, and people who didn't really have any connection, or they didn't feel like they had a connection. When they came there, they were very overwhelmed. I think I once related this story. Chaim Potok, in an interview, he's the author of that. Chaim Potok's parents were very observant Jews. So he came from that life, and he knew that life. He didn't lead that life. But they asked him, did you meet the Rebbe? He said, several times. I attended the gatherings, and I was in his room together with others. Did you ever meet him privately? I said, no. Why didn't you go privately? He says, I specifically and deliberately avoided meeting him privately because I knew how powerful he was and I didn't want to change my life. This is a man who did not want to connect to to climb to a holier level, which is why I haven't read any of his books, and I won't, because his books are based on true fact, but most of them are just false and portray things in the wrong way, and bring out wrong and bad and misleading type of conclusions.
Oh, I have to read.
I don't have to read the book. I am the book. I'm in it.
I'll have to read them.
It's
now.
about me.
They're interesting anyway.
It gets a little boring. It gets a little boring, and the plot is weak, in my opinion. All right.
He was no Shakespeare.
Oh, get this.
Right,
Anyway, so get something to eat and drink, and before you get yourself comfortable.
He was still no Shakespeare.
No.
Very nice to see you.
So this is the short answer to that question of how many worlds are there.
Oh, he already said there are 4 worlds.
But I mean, the question was asked of him.
Of him, no. The question was, if there are 4 worlds, that's an indication that there is space in a place where you don't expect there to be space. In the spiritual world, one should not, or could not, or does not expect that there should be places, because space only occupies a significance here in this world. A spirit, a soul, is a spirit. It doesn't occupy space. It doesn't work in the same rules that we have. It doesn't govern like that. So there is no room over there. There is no, baseball stadium. It doesn't happen. There's no golf course up in heaven. Those.
Don't make him sad. Don't make him sad.
The golf courses are down here on earth. That's heaven on earth.
I heard the whole heaven.
Now he's back. He's backtracking.
I won't get into that now, but
The golf course, there's just no greens.
There's also a big baseball.
It's not about baseball out there.
golf courses in hell, and that's where you can't get. Anyway, so
The sand pits.
he keeps on getting stuck. Yeah. All right. Anyway, so the question that was asked was, how could you define between worlds? That means that there's an upper echelon and a lower echelon, and how is space understandable in the higher world? So the first thing he determined in this essay was that there is space in the upper worlds. That not space as we understand it, but there are levels. So there are higher levels of angels and lower levels of angels. Higher levels of souls and lower levels of souls. And he brought all kinds of different proofs, about 15 different places in the Talmud and in the Midrash that deal with different stories of things that are happening in the other world where there's a higher and a lower. There's a hierarchy there. So it might not be the space the way we perceive it, where here is one thing and there is another thing. In the spirit world, there's no one occupies space, like physical space. But whatever it is levels. And then he got into explaining what these worlds are, and we discussed the first 2 worlds. It was the world of emanation, the one that is a godly world, and it's so godly that it's sort of a continuation of the godly experience. Then the second world is called the world of Beria, and again, this is called in the verse. This is not just a made-up term. This is Barati Yitzarti Afasisiv, Barati Yitzarti Afasisiv, as it said in yesterday's Pirkei Avot that we said, the 6th chapter. Anyway, so the first world of after this world, this godly world, is called the world of Beria, the world of creation. And the reason why it's called creation, this is what we studied last time we got together, which was 2 weeks ago. The reason why it's called the world of creation is because the word Beria, the word creation, the second word in the Bible, in the beginning God created, Bereshis, bara Elokim. That word creation is only applicable to something that has been created ex nihilo, from nothing. When a person in this world creates, whatever is created is not really created. It's a borrowed term. We don't create in this world because whatever we have has been here previously. When you create a painting, the term is creating, but in reality, the paints were here before, the canvas is here before, the paintbrush is here before. You just took paint and you put it on a canvas. Oh, you formed it in a nice way, so you turned it into a painting, but you didn't create anything. You just formed something. You took existing material and put it onto a canvas. But it was existing before.
I've
You know the
lost
famous.
a lot of respect for Leonardo.
There you go. See that? Now, you or anyone around this table, if you can be like Leonardo, or even like much less than him, like any other of the painters, you'll make a lot of money by sitting and drawing, but you won't create.
You're just rearranging.
Correct. So it's like the famous joke about the debate between God and the science. The scientists felt that they were, okay, God, we don't need you anymore. We're in. We're good enough now. We've developed ourselves enough, and we want to prove it. God says, sure, I'll come to the debate. Show up at the debate, and God says to the scientists, you go first. There's more of you here. It's only one. It's only me. You go ahead. So the scientist says, okay, we're going to show you. They pick up a clump of earth and they say, we're going to take this. And God says, excuse me a second. That earth is mine. Create your own earth. Then we'll talk. I did that.
That's the whole story.
That's the story. The story is that God created everything there is here. And whatever we do is, as Anne says, we rearrange. We don't create. We don't use that term create unless you have created something, which we cannot do. No one can do other than God. In the beginning, God created the heaven and earth. And from ex nihilo, as the Latin term is, which means from nothing. Nihilo to ex something nihilo, from nil, from nothing. So therefore, the second world is called the world of creation because it feels as though something new has happened. It doesn't seem to have that godliness, that godly strength, that godly obviousness as there is present in the top world, the higher level called Atzilus. The world of Atzilus again means emanation. It means close to God, where you can actually feel God. And souls that come from that place, like the soul of Moses, as the Ari says, as the great Kabbalists say, when you're in that atmosphere, you feel God, or you feel godly, or you want to be more godly. It's automatic, as I was telling my friend Chaim Potter just the other day. So you have this feeling that is there, it's present, it's real, because the soul of that person is very, very powerful. It's not just a personality, it's the godly personality that's within that person. That's when you know that something comes from way out there. Then you have others who may be less godly, but you feel closer. Then you have those who are very distant. They may be fully observant, whatever, but you just don't feel godliness around them. They have different ways, and that's why we're all different, because we are influenced by our spiritual reality as well. So the first world is called the world of emanation. It's emanation of God. It's right. It's God is like sort of in there. The second one has a major disconnect from the feeling that you're close to God, and therefore the angels that are in there get a little mashuga when they're there, because godliness is not so apparent in the world, and the angels, when they see it, when they get all excited, they get all inspired, and they react in different ways. So those are the first worlds. We are now on page 31. Page 30, okay, page 30. And we are in the world of Yetzirah. You'll see that there is a new stage over here called Yetzirah. The world of Yetzirah is the third of the four worlds. And although it contains the elements contained in the worlds of Atzilut and Beriah, it has the same structure, the same inside as the other two do. However, the Metziut we've mentioned before, means the the entity, right, of the worlds of Yetzirah is stronger than that of the world of Beriah. Entity means that you feel more non-godly. You feel more of itself than the other two. The world of Atzilut, you feel God very, very powerfully. The other one, you feel less God. But the world itself is still, has a lot of powerful godly elements. The world of Yetzirah is a lot less, called the world of formation. The world of Yetzirah means formation. I've used this example before. If you want to build a table, so you go to Home Depot and you get the wood that they created. Again, they didn't create it, but they cut it and they shaped it and they have it sold to you. So now you have a bunch of wood on the floor. Now, you want to cut it into form or formation. That's just your level, and then you actually put it together and you've now made the table. So the first level of the table is the fact that it's growing out there. That's sort of the emanation. It's the wood that's growing from the ground. Somebody took it and created it into planks and into sheets and into pieces that you can now use. When you bring it home, though, you've got to form it into the way you want it to be formed, whether it's a table or a chair or a closet or whatever.
I'm going to move that because
Thank you.
I can see that falling
On you.
with this motion.
Okay. I'll be able to
So the form you last into what?
reform
Oh.
your pants into. All right. For the Metziut, or the entity of the world of Beriah, consists of the fact that it is a production of being from nothingness. Beriah, creating something from nothing. So the whole world feels like it's a new creation here. Something has happened over here that is new, that is not present previously. It is a new creation. But its entire Metziut is its capacity to acquire form. It's, in other words, the reason why you have this creation is so eventually you should be able to form it into some formation. Or, back to Home Depot, the reason why they have wood there is so you should be able to take it home and form it into different shapes. So the purpose of it being in Home Depot, not outside growing in the ground, is so that you should be able to take it home and form it into something.
Wait,
Or-
the wood in Home Depot is Bria or Yetzirah?
The wood is the Bria there. You're taking it home in order to form it.
So bringing it home is Yetzirah?
Yeah, bringing it home and forming it is the formation.
Are there still new creations, or are all the creations done already?
You mean is God creating new
They
worlds?
create, like, okay, we want to make a table. Well, the trees are growing, but that's not new. That's just a reformation of whatever's in the ground.
You've taken
Nutrients and-
seeds and whatever.
Yeah, so that's not new. Are there new
No.
creations anymore? They're all here.
Yeah, the only creations that can be are spiritual creations. So,
Okay.
but when God decided to create the world, He created everything. He created the world and everything in it. It
So the
works by
physical
itself,
stuff
runs by
is all
itself.
here.
Everything is here. It runs by itself. Well, not by itself. If you have people here, then they could direct it. So people can build houses, and people can build streets, and people can build things to walk along, to drive along the streets. People can build the furniture, and people can plant foodstuffs and so on. People can take this world and continue to utilize it and direct it in the right way. If you don't touch anything, you let it go, then the world will take care of itself. Things will grow. Things grow all the time. The earth doesn't stop, and it just continues to produce. It might produce thorns and thistles and weeds and stuff that you don't need. So all of a sudden, grass will start coming up from the cracks, and trees will start growing from the lawns, and the house will be gone. In 10, 20, 40, 50 years, they can bury everything. It just is nonstop. So it's wild. Our function is to keep it focused, to keep what we have going the way of the world. In fact, God says to the Jewish people in the book of Shemos, in the book of Exodus, he says, I'm bringing you into the land, but you won't go in there in one shot. Because if you do, if I get rid of the enemies like in one shot, it'll take you time to settle. In the meantime, the animals will run rampant, and the undergrowth will just grow up, and we'll just run through the whole country. That won't be right. Do you know that when the Jewish people came back to Israel at the turn of the century, 1900, 1910, as a result of the pogroms and the wars in late 1800s, 1900s, they came to an Israel that was completely and utterly devoid. It was filled with sand and swamps. These people say they were living there. There was nothing there. Tel Aviv is just about 105 years old. That's it. What was Tel Aviv? When you go to Israel, you go to Independence Hall, which is where they declared the independence of Israel in 1948. They have pictures hanging up in there of what Tel Aviv looked like. Sand dunes. Complete sand. And the people said to them, what are you, crazy? You're building on sand? This is the beach over here. They said, no, it's not the beach. This is our land. They've allowed sand for 2,000 years to accumulate and build up and go crazy. And they've allowed the fields to just lie fallow, and everything just fell apart. When you drive along Israel, even in the highways, unbuilt up places, you see just stones all over the place, like sticking out of the ground, like little monuments sort of come. That's all from old construction that has over the 2,000-3,000 years just been neglected, and everything falls apart. So they didn't move to Israel. They built it with their hands. They drained the swamps, and they pushed away the sand, and they dug in, and they built cities and created the infrastructure. But the people who were living there were a bunch of shepherds and some peddlers. That's what they were, from different countries around. These were not indigenous to the land. It's not our land. What's our land? What did you do here? They were living in the 150 years ago. There was very little. There was Jerusalem, there was Hebron, and there was Sfat and Haifa and Tiberias and just a few other main cities that remained. And all of those had Jews, and the ones that didn't have Jews were a bunch of nothing. Even today, you go to the Arab cities and the Arab villages. There's garbage all over the place. It doesn't even look like. It looks like they're temporary there. The houses are all dark, and there's no love of the land. There's nothing. When you go to Israel, when the Jewish people went to Israel, they didn't go there to find a haven. They went home, and that's what they felt like. So if you leave it going, it just turns into swamps and sand and nothing. Turns into absolute nothingness. Which is why the people, the human beings, are charged to look after the world. When God puts Adam in the Garden of Eden, he says, I want you to work it, and I want you to guard it, or to look after it, to take care of it. Not just to work it, but to make sure that it remains a place where people can live, and it also remains a place where the rest of the creatures of the world can thrive. There are creatures in the world who are supposed to be wild. And they don't need our help. So when you talk about the worlds, the spiritual worlds, it works in the same way. We as human beings are created in a way that gives us an appreciation of God. One of his introductions over here was that the book of Job, the book of Eve, says that when I look at my own flesh, I can perceive God. So we look at our own lives and how things work in our life, we see how God works. So in our life, we have this concept that there's material out there, then you prepare it, then you form it, and then you make it. That's how God's energy comes to this world. It starts with a very intense godliness, comes from God itself, and then slowly it goes through these worlds, and each one of these worlds has sections in it that reshape this godliness. So by the time it comes to this world, it looks like grass, it looks like trees, it looks like tables, but in reality, it's all God's energy that's creating this world. So these are the four worlds. The third world is the world of formation. And let's see again for the second paragraph in the Yetzirah. For the Metziut of the world of Bria, the entity of Bria consists of the fact that it is a production of being from nothingness. That's what it is. It's something that is created from nothingness. But its entire Metziut, what's the purpose of it, is its capacity to acquire form, to be formatted, to be formed into a certain shape. But it is not yet a full-fledged Metziut. That means it's not yet a full-fledged physical reality that you can actually touch with your physical hands. It is nothing more than the first substance. The world of Yetzirah, however, the third world, is a formed Metziut that possesses a complete form. It has a form to it. It is called Yetzirah for two reasons. Number one, it is a full-fledged Metziut. It is something that you can actually see as a structure. And two, it is formed with a particular form. It is made in a particular way that is recognizable. But it's not yet the final product.
Could you explain the creation of the first tongues?
Yes, the first tongues, which is brought in the Pirkei Avot. So in Pirkei Avot, these are 5 or 6 chapters of the Talmud, but they act differently than the rest of the Talmud. The rest of the Talmud is basically law, what you can and what you can't. Within the law, there's also discussions about some other stuff, Jewish life stories, Kabbalah, all of that is all weaved into the Talmud. These 5 or 6 chapters are ethics. Anything that's in there is all connected to ethics, as the Talmud itself attests to that. Whatever's in there is ethics. It might not seem that way, but when you look deeper into it, it's ethics. And one of the things that it discusses, over there is what God created on the last day of creation, the 6th day of creation, and he created this in twilight, between day and night. We know the last thing God created in this world was the woman, mankind, man, then woman. But in twilight, neither here or there, God created things that came to this world on a later basis that were all like miraculous. And one of the things he created, for example, the capacity for the donkey of Bilam to speak. You say, a donkey spoke? Well, you should have shown up here about 7-8 weeks ago when it was that Torah portion, and we went through that. But within that list of things that were created, then is also the tweezers or the tongues, because that was But I'm not going into all 10 of them. It says 10 things were created at that time, but I don't want. This is a distraction. But the tongues, the tweezers, have to be created with another pair of tongues. Yeah.
Not tongues.
No, not a tongue. Not a tongue to
Oh, I
speak.
thought you meant different languages.
Tongues
Yeah.
or tweezers.
Yeah, not tongue.
Tongues or tongues, yeah. But not tongues. They are tweezers. The word that is used is for the same word that is used today, till today in Hebrew as tweezers. Tweezers can only be created via another pair of tweezers. How do you create tweezers? You got to hold on to the metal and to shape it into a certain shape. He created a tool that this world should be able to create other tools.
So this was the first tool?
This was the first thing that you would be able to pick something up with it. What's even more, they wouldn't have been able to do anything without that. What's even more is that according to the Midrash, people who were created until Noah, human beings were created just like with webbed fingers. They were created like this. And this was as a result of the curse to Adam when he said it's going to be very difficult to plant because if you don't have fingers, it's hard to form things, to shape things. And when Noah was born, the Torah says they called him Noah. This is where the Midrash is. They called him Noah because this will comfort us from the difficulties of our work of our hands. That's the word Noach means to be calm, to be comforted. Not like Noach, like Nachem, Menachem is comforting. So when he's born, they said this guy's going to come. How would they know when a baby is born? Because his fingers were all born separate, and therefore they realized that curse of the difficulties of creating food, which those days was very pronounced. The Midrash goes into it. I'm not going to get into that now. They knew that he could create a lot more. He was the one who was able to build that ark, and he was able to shape and form with separated fingers.
So punishment for Adam was that the ancestors all had
I don't know.
ancestors.
Yeah, I don't know
progeny.
when. I wouldn't know when that would have happened. I'm not sure when it didn't happen when he said it. But there was web. They couldn't use their fingers. They had to grasp everything like this. So there wasn't separateness in order to create things.
And it wasn't until Noah that it was.
So when Noah was born, they said, when he was born, now this one will come. How would they know? Because his fingers were created open. So he had the capacity to touch, to feel, the delicate touch.
Was this after? I'm so ill-informed. Is this after they left Egypt?
This is thousands of years. This is way before.
Oh, it's before.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Noah was born in the first 1,000 years.
Okay.
And Egypt was in the year 2,448. It was more than 1,500 years after Noah. In fact, Noah lived to the age of 950. And he was able to see 10 generations. And one of them, the 10th generation after him, was Abraham. Abraham only lived for 175 years. As God says, I'm going to slow down the people are not going to live that long now. So there was a connection between Noah and Abraham, although there were so many years in between. Now we've gotten completely off topic. Anyway, but God gave the capacity for people to create or to form, I would imagine, not to create, but for people to do with these tweezers or tongues or whatever, tongues. So the ability to, you can't create one of those without holding it with something else. So what would be something else you would hold it with? A whole piece of wood. Like how would you do it? So God did that to
chopsticks.
Give the ability for people to actually create to whatever. And what's ethical about that? What's an ethics? Why would that be something in ethics? But that's for a different time. I'll leave that for you. All right. So let's move on to back to that last paragraph. The world of Yetzirah, however, is a formed metziut, a formed entity that possesses a complete form. It is called Yetzirah for two reasons. Number one, it is a full-fledged metziut. You can actually feel that there's something here now. And number two, it is formed with a particular form, where the other ones are more spiritual gray areas, if you will. Now, here comes the fourth and final world, the world of Asiya, which means action.
I just want to ask a question. Okay, in the world of Yetzirah, is that close to when they're in the realm of creation? Because that was the time for.
What do you mean by creation?
Well,
creating of this world?
Well, because in creation, that's when God formed earth.
No.
It's no kind of spiritual relationship.
And it's no physical relationship. There's nothing physical there.
That's what I'm saying. Spiritually, is that like a relationship, or is that kind of like a structure spiritually? Because there's structure to everything. That's what I'm trying to understand.
I'm not understanding the question. You're saying that the spiritual structure we are talking all spiritual. Whatever you have over here is completely spiritual.
Right,
There's no physical entity until you get to the fourth level.
okay,
And even within the fourth level, it's at the bottom of the rung of it, at the bottom of the ladder there. At the bottom of the pit. That's where we are. In the words of the Talmud, this is the deepest pit it can be. And then you have a city called Pittsburgh. No. All right, go ahead.
okay.
So now Asiya, the world of Asiya is the fourth of the four worlds, and although this world too contains all the elements that are contained in Yetzirah, Beriah, and Atzilut, which comes before it, nevertheless it is the lowest of all worlds. It is therefore called Asiya, which connotes the lowest capacity, deed, or actuality. Even within ourselves, the lowest form of a person is action. Because everything else is within us. Action is always outside of us. Action meaning things that we do. We do things with the external part of ourselves, hands and feet, and action. So we build and we create and we touch and we move. This is all through action, or the lowest elements of the person, because they are geared to external. And again, action meaning movement and building and things that happen outside of us, but through us. For example, there are three general elements within the person. There is thought, and that is very absolutely personal. My thoughts, if I don't want to share them, they will remain with me for all time, because they're mine, and only mine. I'm the only one who can release them. Speech starts within inside of the person, and not only is it within the person, but it's created through breath, through the person's essence, through the person's life. But it is intended to come out of the person. So it's already a relationship. Hopefully everybody is talking to other people and not to themselves. That's the first sign.
No, as long as you don't respond in a different voice, then you're all right. Because I do that all the time. I talk to myself.
Well, that's the first
I'm the
sign.
best listener.
The second sign is that you have hair on the palm of your hand. And the third sign is that you actually go look for it.
Say what?
So, speech begins within the deepest annals of the person. It's life, because it's breath. It starts in the brain, and you are transmitting very personal, deep things, but it's designed to go out. Action is completely outside of us. It's always outside. It's never part of us, not the way thought and speech is. It's always outside. And we have to watch. If you don't understand what the person is doing, wait until he's finished. If you're talking to Leonardo or to whoever else is creating a painting or a building or a song, sometimes you hear something, that doesn't sound right. Well, just wait till the end of the song, and then we'll see how it's built up into something. So action is always outside of us. It's always outside, external. So the lowest world is called the world of action, because that is the bottom. That is the end of everything. Of course, it is the end result of everything as well. Because when you think and when you speak, then you want to do something based on what you've said and what you've thought. All right, now we can figure out what you were thinking and what you were saying. Now, because now that it's here, we can see it, we can observe it, we can know it. So yes, action is the end result, which is where you want to go. It's the end. So if you were traveling from New York to Peachtree City, and you're driving along, and you stopped off in Philadelphia, and you stopped off in D.C., you stopped off in somewhere in Virginia, and then you went to Charlotte, and then you came to Peachtree City. That's the end.
Sure.
But that's the goal. So the end, it's the end. It's the end of everything. That could be, though, should be the goal, which is what God wanted by creating all of these spiritual worlds. Ultimately, though, He wanted to come down here. He wanted the entity to be here.
And where, I know we've gone over this probably every week, because I think I've asked you this question every week, but I have a short memory. Where does this derive itself from? Like, is this in the Torah? Is it in the oral?
See, when you're talking about Kabbalah, this is Kabbalah. What we're learning now is Hasidic,
Yeah.
Kabbalistic. When you learn about Kabbalah, Kabbalah is considered the sod, or the secret, or the esoteric, the mystical part of the Torah. So when you see something in the Torah, it seems to be telling a story. But in Judaism, and this is all over the place, there is more to the story than you think. And when you look at the Torah, there are so many strange appearances where verses seem to be out of place, words seem to be missing or too many, or letters seem to be missing or too many of them. And they are indicating something. The Torah cannot, if God wanted to put everything out there, then there would be no end. We'd never be able to study this. It takes a year as it is to go through the Torah from beginning to the end. And even then, every year you go through, you find new things and things that you didn't realize, you didn't think of, or whatever. It is endless with it because it's godly. So it is to no end. It is infinite. But within the infinity, there are other things that are there that are like hinted, alluded to. I'll give you an example. It might be difficult for you to imagine this, but I'll give you an example. I mentioned this at the table on Friday night. The Torah says in yesterday's Torah portion, last week's Torah portion, that you can only offer offerings, sacrifices, in the place that I choose. Once Jerusalem was chosen as the God's end of all, as it says then in the book, at the end of the book of Samuel, when David buys it, purchases the lot where the Mount Moriah, where the Temple Mount. And then in the book of Kings again, God says, this is the place that I have chosen for all eternity and blood. It says this in the Psalms, it says this in several places. So God says in yesterday's portion, when the time will come that this place will be chosen, you can only offer the offerings there. Nowhere else in the world. So you can't set up an altar here and offer to God. Wait, what's wrong? I'm just offering to God. No, it can only be there. Technically, we can build an altar on the Temple Mount today and offer to God. We can't do it because of external reasons. But the technicality is that there we can build it even if there's no temple structure. The altar can be built there. It won't be, but it can be. But wait, there is a story in the book of Kings with Eliyahu Hanavi, Elijah the prophet, and he had a major debate between idol-worshipping Baal people, and it was a major problem. There was a king called Achav, whose wife was Izebel, and Izebel came not from Jewish descent, and she brought with her, when she came to Israel to marry Achav, she brought with her all kinds of cronies, who ended up becoming priests for the worshipping of the Baal idol. And it took off like wildfire. Those days, Jews just loved to worship idols. It was just a terrible, terrible thing, which doesn't happen anymore, thank God. The Talmud says that Ezra removed that desire, so we don't have that feeling, that desire. But it was a big problem. And Elijah found himself basically alone against so many people. And when the Jewish people saw that so many priests and so much was going on over there, it was obvious that this place was happening, and the Jews have some ancient problem. It's the old-fashioned Torah. We're in a new generation now. I've heard that before, right? So Elijah has a major debate on Mount Carmel, which is still there today in Haifa, overlooking the Mediterranean Sea. And basically, and I can't get into the whole story, but basically he offers a bull to God. And the question that is debated in the Talmud extensively is, how does he go offer something to God that the Torah says you can only offer on Jerusalem, the place where God chooses? You can only offer to God on the altar in Jerusalem. And basically, the Talmud goes through all the different words and then presents a story. I can't get into these details. Bottom line, this was a rare exception where God instructed him to do this, and it's just a one-time thing. Okay, So a one-time thing, God can tell a prophet that has been established as a proper, true, and loyal prophet to God that there are exceptions. He can do things that are exceptions to the rule. Comes along, so this is in the Talmud, comes along a great, great sage who lived about 900 years ago by the name of Rabbi Yaakov, the son of Asher. And he writes a commentary on the Torah. He also writes books of law and stuff like that. But he writes a commentary on the Torah which lets you glimpse into some amazing things. And he finds that on those words where the Torah says, and I can actually show it to you in the Hebrew, when the Torah says, but I'll say these words now, Hishama lecha, watch this, guard yourselves, pen lest. Now here comes 5 words, tale olasecha, b'chol makom asher tireh, in any place that you think. Guard yourself. Don't offer offerings in any place that you see fit, that you think is correct. Hishama lecha, guard yourselves, pen lest. Now the next 5 words, tale olosecha b'chol makom asher. Those 5 words, the last letters of those words. Ta'aleh has a hey, olosecha has a chaf, b'chol has a lamed, makom has a mem, asher has a resh. You take those letters, just have to rearrange the resh, put it in the front. It turns out that it's writing there Ha-Carmel, the mount, the Carmel mountain. And the word bechol, in all places, could have just said in a place that you see fit. In all places that you see fit, that word bechol, if you count up the letters, it equals 52. And if you count up the word Eliyahu, it also equals 52. Now, wait a minute. The Torah could have used different language, different words. The fact that these 5 words come in that very verse that says, don't do it in any place that you see. And there's alluded there, Ha-Carmel, and the numerical equivalence of the name Eliyahu. Oh, now, wait a minute. Now you've seen something completely different. The Torah has hidden things in it. Torah was written 1,000 years before Elijah, or so. And Mount Carmel, to the odds of this happening are very, very unusual. And this is found all over the Torah. This is not just a one-time thing. Just sharing you one little thing. And this is one of the sages, this Rabbi Yaakov, that shows some of this stuff, which is just a mind-boggling. And that's just one, that's not even the secret of the Torah. That's just the illusionary part. That things are hidden in the Torah, that things are alluded to in the Torah in this kind of way. Then you had the mystical part, the secrets of the Torah, where you see a deeper side to things. So the verse says in the book of Isaiah that I created everything for my honor. But he uses 4 different words of creation. Why is he using that? Whatever I've created, whatever I've formed, whatever I've made, whatever. Just say whatever's here is. Again, when you look at all these words, people throughout history have paid attention to this. Now, there have been great sages who have been great in extrapolating law by comparing different things one to another. Like that's what the Talmud is. There have been great sages who have done this, illusion stuff. And there are other sages who have been great in the Kabbalah, the mystical part of the Torah. Normally, though, the sages have been great in all areas of the Torah, but some have a special knack in doing different things. And it's all based on the Torah. There's nothing that's not based in the Torah. That's number one. And number two, as I mentioned to somebody last week, when you have a person who is preaching the secrets of the Torah, the mystical parts of the Torah, then that person better look like Moses. Because if that person looks like some guy who is feeding Kabbalah to Kabbalah centers, those people are not real. They're just taking Kabbalah that they've heard from other people, and they don't behave that way. They don't have the right, therefore, to portray themselves as somebody looking for the mystery. What are they looking for? What is the mystery of the Torah? They're looking to enhance the holiness and the godliness of the Torah. So if a person doesn't behave that way, if that person doesn't have a beard, for example, there's no one to talk to. Forget about it. Is he allowed to shave his beard? He can do whatever he wants, but don't start teaching me mystical, holy parts of Torah. It's in order to enhance the holiness and the relationship with God. And so these people who teach this are people who live it, are people who have studied it and have internalized it and have lived their lives that way. So it's not as it's some kind of suggestions here. This is all based on proof, and he says clearly when he begins it that this is based on, he's just gathering together. There is no innovation here. He's just giving us a gathering of information that he picks up from different places, and a lot of them is footnoted here as well by the compilers of this book. Those who translated this letter, which is again a letter that he sent to someone in response to a question. So, any time a sage comes along and suggests something, then that sage better be backed up. So, in other words, the Rambam, Maimonides, he writes his magnum opus, his lifetime achievement, is the book of law, of the Yad HaChazaka, the book of the Rambam, the law. He has lots of works, but his work of the law is his big thing. And he writes in his introduction, I am gathering together from the Talmud and from the Midrash, and it's scattered all over the place. And Talmud doesn't have a specific, it has a subject, but the subjects go quickly off. In the Talmud, there's more discussions. It's not focused on the subject necessarily. So he says you won't have to go through the Talmud and drive through all of the different things of the sages from within the Talmud and then even after the Talmud, because I'm going to put it all in here. So you can just read this and you'll get the law out of it. And that's just what he does. But there's certain places in the Talmud where it's not decided, where it's left for discussion. And sometimes he will say, this is a doubt. It's a doubt if she's married. It's a doubt if she's divorced. It's a doubt if he's ritually clean. Or it's a doubt if he's unclean. There's doubts over here. Sometimes he'll say, and I think this is the law. Anytime he says something of his own, he says, and my opinion is, this is how I see it. He actually uses the word see. Rashi, who is one of the greatest commentaries on the Torah ever, lives about 1,000 years ago in the border of France and Germany. And he writes a commentary based on the Talmud, on the Midrash, all in the Torah. He doesn't write anything of his own. When he says, and I think, he writes, this is my opinion. He doesn't say, he doesn't write commentary, his interpretation. The greatness of these writers, Rashi and the Rambam, is not that they wrote, it's how they wrote. When they took something from the Talmud, if they changed a letter, they're saying something. And they don't, that's why there's so many commentaries on Rashi. There's hundreds of commentaries on the commentary. Because they point out to you, look what Rashi's really saying here. Look how he's teaching here. And it's amazing. He'll take a word and he'll change the word from what the Midrash says to what the Talmud says to something else, and he's trying to help us understand what the verse is saying without saying it. He relies on the language and on the shortness. Rashi also writes a commentary on the entire Talmud, but in one place he died before he finished his commentary. So his grandson says, from here Rashi died. From here is my commentary. The rest of the pages in that volume of Talmud, I can show it to you. He can't shorten it the way his grandfather. It was his grandson. He can't shorten it the way his grandfather did it, because for that you need an encyclopedia type of mind to be able to keep everything to the fewest words possible. Rashi was a school teacher. He was teaching children. He writes, my commentary is too simple for the 5-year-old to understand. But when you're 50 years old, you can spend a lifetime trying to understand what he's saying, only because of the way he writes. In other words, he's not offering his own commentary, but the way he presents it is his spin on it. Not his commentary, not his interpretation, but his way of understanding that piece of Talmud or that piece of Midrash. And that's how it is throughout. I know this is a diversion of what we're doing here, but it's very important to understand. There is no true Torah sage from the time of Moses till today that suggests something without saying, and this is the way I see it, and you're welcome to argue with me if you want. That's just my opinion, and this is my opinion. But when somebody is just writing something from before, today's day and age, somebody comes along and says, human embryos. Can we use human embryos to see if we can find a miracle to heal ALS instead of dumping water and ice over your head? Let's get to work. Can you use human embryos? Is that permissible? Now, if you ask a doctor or if you ask a scientist, they'll give you their opinion. But if you ask a rabbi, he can't say yes or no. He will have to say, well, the Talmud says this, the Rambam says that, Rashi says this one, the Rebbe said that, and 500 years ago I found this, and if you put all this together, the way it seems to me, if you put it, now another rabbi can come along and say, are you kidding me? How do you compare this and that and the other? There's no comparison of it. That's where these discussions come along. So, today's rabbi, you can't just be a rabbi that knows Torah. You would have to be an expert in that whole field. And so there are rabbis today who are experts in different fields. Can you be an expert in science and in medicine and so on and so forth and be the rabbi? So it's complicated. There's no interpretations in it. That's what I'm saying. The word interpretation is used very loosely. So you have people who don't follow the Torah, who are looking for ways to show you that the Torah didn't mean what it really said. So when it says keeping kosher, in one place it says clean. So therefore, you see, it's all about clean. But you're a dumbbell because you didn't read what all the other people before you came along and explained it. At least follow that and say, I read all of this, and this is my... I once met, and I'll conclude with this, I once met a conservative rabbi, and I had to give I was substituting for him, and then he came back, or vice versa. I was substituting for him while he was leaving. And the topic that's right, I was taking the class, a teen class, that he was giving that class, and he couldn't make it for that semester. And the topic was the world to come, or life after life, something like that. So I called him up. I said, what have you been doing till now? He hadn't started. I just wanted to know about the kids and everything else. He says, you know that it doesn't mention the soul goes to a different world. It doesn't mention that in the Torah at all. I said, yeah, but it's mentioned in the Talmud all over the place. It's a Talmud. He was like dismissed the entire Talmud. So I said, well, it's also mentioned in the scriptures. It's mentioned in the book of Koheles, the book of Ecclesiastes says, and the spirit returns to the place where it came from, so on and so forth. There are different places where you can find it there. So I said, well, what's your problem with the Talmud? And he says to me these words. I'm not kidding. This is 20 years ago. And he's still a rabbi today in Atlanta. He says, look, the Talmud is comprised of statements of a bunch of rabbis. I'm also a rabbi. Sometimes I agree, and sometimes I beg to disagree. So I said, for you to say that, it's obvious that you haven't studied much Talmud in your life. Is that a fair statement to make? He says, yeah. I said, okay, enough said. So you can blabber, say whatever you want. You can platter, you can smack, you can say anything you want to say. But the more you say, the more stupid you sound, because it's ignorant. It's just you know what you're talking about. If you studied the Talmud, you would never say that. I disagree with those rabbis. What do you mean you disagree? We disagree with what? With what are you disagreeing with? With no knowledge. Because you don't like something. If you don't like something, maybe it's you're the problem and not the Talmud is the problem. That's the attitude that people who teach Torah need to have. It's beyond, I don't understand this. If you don't understand it, then you don't understand. That's okay. As the Talmud itself says, teach yourselves to say, I don't know. And that's okay. And we spend a lifetime trying to find out. Maybe when you get older, as our parents told us, when you get older, you'll understand. Maybe that had some ring of truth to it. Because when the more experience and the more knowledge that we have, the better capacity we have to understand, to appreciate, and to have knowledge of what is it. So this rabbi who's writing this letter this particular thing is not even a Hasidic discourse where he's sort of, over here he's just giving information that is collected from previous. Where did the previous get it from? It's all in the same way. And if one tends to disagree, that's okay, as long as one knows all the things that have come before. Then you can say, I've gone through the whole chain and I see something different here. Present it, then we'll see if other rabbis will accept it, if it will be acceptable by the Jewish people. That's how Torah is taught. We all have a part in it, but we all have to have the whole Torah in order to find our part. We have to get all of it in. That will do for today.